Awakening Code Radio with Eric Rankin. Mind-expanding talk and music every Tuesday night on KX 93.5.
This show is all about frequency geometry. We're bouncing around the idea of how important frequency is in our lives, and literally it's everything. When you break us down to the smallest thing that we can imagine, we're talking atomic and subatomic particles, which are energy. That's what we are. We are energy signatures, literally stardust. Everything that is within us that we call a solid came from outer space. They call us star seeds because that's literally quite true. That's what we are. And we're animated and held in place by frequency. That is what holds everything. The patterning of any life, anything is frequency. And people, geniuses like Tesla and Einstein understood this, and we are awakening to it in new ways. And my personal journey was, it felt like frequency for dummies. I am no math whiz, I'm no geometry whiz, I'm no musical whiz, I'm none of those things. But I might be the right guy to talk about this simple application. And the way it came to me, literally, I was staring at this whiteboard and I just said, what if you took the numbers found in geometric shapes and played them as tones? That was easy. And it's very easy to do because a geometric shape, square, circle, pentagon, hexagon, octagon, will always have a sum of angles. That sum in a circle is 360, of a pentagon is 540, of an octagon is 1080. You can play those as frequencies. And the thing that struck me, I played those frequencies on my iPhone. There's an app called Tone Generator. So you could punch in the numerical value of a frequency you want to hear in hertz cycles per second. And I realized that each one of these was a variation, was a note required to build an F-sharp major chord. And I thought, well, that's interesting. We play all of these geometric tones and they happen to harmonize with each other. And then because of my book, The Aquarians, I was aware of this big grand cycling of time, the 25,920 year precession of the equinox, and that divided by 12 is 2160. 2160 is the length of an age, whether we're in the age of Aquarius or age of Pisces. The length of those ages is 2,160 years, and that happens to also be one of those geometric numbers. If you take a cube, more or less 6 squares, and add them together, you get 2160. Or the 6 circles in the seed of life pattern in sacred geometry, 2160. And amazingly enough, our moon happens to be 2160 miles across as well. So I'm like, wow, there are these different measurements. There's 4 different things we're talking about, 4 different disciplines: time, distance, geometry, frequency. And yet here's this number, 2160, as just one example. Many other repeating patterns, but this 2160, and I'm like, what is the common thread of these? Because that's what I think has stopped people, even audio engineers or whatever. It's like, well, we measure sound in cycles per second, but it could have been anything. We could have measured sound in a distance. We could have measured it in some other time measurement. So to say that we measure it in cycles per second is just an arbitrary measurement. Okay, I'll give you that for the moment. And then you say, well, the moon is 2160 miles across. Another arbitrary measurement. That's based on 12 inches to a foot and all these things. Okay, I'll give you that. And geometry, that's based on 60-degree math. And you have a 360-degree circle, which gives you all the angles of geometry. That could even be argued. That's arbitrary, the 1260 math. Okay. But what most people do not know is all of those disciplines come from the same place in time. They come from what we call the Sumerian counting system, which is 1260 based. It arrived about 5,000 years ago in Mesopotamia, and supposedly, here's the odd connection between like the integratron and the ET connection there, is that the Sumerians themselves said they were given this counting system and the way to create the first written language in the world and all these other amazing technological advances by a sky visitor race that they called the Anunnaki. And we have talked, if you watch Ancient Aliens, you will hear the Anunnaki. If you listen to conspiracy theorists, they've got this idea, I know the Anunnaki are evil aliens or whatever, we were slaves and all these things. I'm not going to go down any of those paths. I really don't need to spend my energy doing that. I only address that the Sumerians themselves created murals that shows vehicles and beings in the sky, and they said this jump in technology of how we created math that birthed algebra and geometry out of nothing, out of more or less probably people counting on their hands, which would have been metrics, base 10 math. That's not where we started. We started with this 1260 counting system. So I thought that's amazing. It's almost like whoever these Anunnaki, if that's the right word or not, but some intelligence, maybe it's a future version of ourselves coming back to the past, or maybe it's just consciousness. It's unleashing a part of our brain that we don't usually access, but something burst through, and it almost became, like Michelle described, a breadcrumbs to follow this numerical pattern. And really, to this day, this is an unfolding counting system. When we talk about frequency as measured in cycles per second, that's only a 150-year-old invention. So from 5,000 years ago to 150 years ago, it still is like puzzle pieces putting themselves in place to reveal something else. And what it does, one thing it reveals is there's this synchronistic nature to the patterning of life.
Awakening Code Radio is available on podcast. Visit www.kx935.com. Click podcast, then scroll to Awakening Code's previous shows.